Today on Locked On Rockies, two things happened this weekend. The Rockies finished their historically bad season with a dud, and the Rockies made a pretty big splash in the draft.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 14th day of July in the year 2025. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot, because that's what we do around here each and every day, free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. You can fire off your Rockies hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies. Give me your reactions to the Rockies drafting Ethan Holliday, the Rockies going down and playing a series in which I was most frustrated by this, because it was just it's I don't know if undisciplined or sloppy. It just is crazy to me. Not crazy. It's not crazy. It's far from the right word to say. Games like Sunday highlight just how frustrating it is for the Rockies, because again, it was just situations throughout the same old stuff, plus lackluster defense, lackluster stuff, and young guys that sure are going through the learning curves of everything like that, but dropping routine fly balls, making drawing out things, making mistakes. The mental mistakes of the Rockies continue to mount, and we're on full display in this series here for the Rockies against the Reds. Before we dive into everything today, I've got to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. So let's start with the big news. Let's start with the Ethan Holliday news. The Rockies, with the number 4 overall pick in the draft, they got their guy. They're in the mock drafts and everything. They were talking about, will Holliday fall? Will he get there? It was interesting because with the force, it seemed very clear that the Mariners, and then who was it? Who else was there? Who was the number 3 pick? Mariners and let me get the thing up here. Sorry. Angels and Mariners were it looked like in all the mocks and everything, locked in on pitching, going for pitchers. So, because I knew Holliday was in there, and I was kind of curious. It was like, if he's on track to go number 1, possibly to the Nationals. The Nationals instead go with the high school shortstop Eli Willits. They're also from Oklahoma, and also a son of a former ball player as well. All the mocks were saying, if Holliday isn't taken number 1 overall by the Nats, he will be a Rocky. And sure enough, he falls in the draft, and he is a Rocky. And I think when you're talking about small things that can kind of, build a little bit of that excitement, when you hear that Holliday name get there, when you look at the possibilities and the profile of Ethan Holliday, you get encouraged. You get excited here. Here's a little bit from what Evan Lang writes on Purple Row. Colorado Rockies select shortstop, third base Ethan Holliday, 4th overall. Holliday was expected to go in the top 4 selections of the draft when the Washington Nationals and Los Angeles Angels made surprising underslot picks with Fort Cobb Broxton, Oklahoma shortstop Eli Willits, and University of California Santa Barbara right-handed pitcher Tyler Bremner, respectively. The Rockies had a clear shot at the prospect topping their draft board. Holliday is ranked as the number 1 overall prospect per MLB Pipeline and was linked to the Rockies in a number of mock drafts. One of the best raw left-handed power bats in the draft, Holliday has a 65 rated power tool paired with a solid hit tool. The 18-year-old is 6'4" and 210 pounds, resembling his father, Matt. Matt Holliday was drafted by the Rockies in the 7th round of the 1998 draft and grew into a 7-time All-Star and 4-time Silver Slugger. Holliday enters the Rockies organization as a shortstop, but with his big body, he will likely be outside or sized out of the position. With good footwork and a strong arm, he has the tools to become a quality defender at third base. He could also potentially play left field like his father. With the Rockies at the ground floor of a potentially lengthy rebuild, the organization will pin their hopes on the son of a Rocktober legend in hopes of finding Rocktober yet again in the future. This is something that does get you that excitement factor. When you're seeing some of the comps here, MLB draft, the MLB draft tracker on ESPN, the player comps for him are a left-handed hitting version of Matt Chapman or Eugenio Suarez. Those are great comps. The Rockies are looking for 30 home run guys. The Rockies need power bats. The path back to the successful Colorado Rockies will be built on offense. The offense is going to be has to be the difference maker for the Colorado Rockies. It's going to be the thing that makes Coors Field a pain in the butt to play for the opposition. You need to pair that. You need to be able to have guys that can do that damage, use their big frames, hit long balls, hit the ball hard, hit for power. I know I say we don't always have to hit home runs, but it's not just home runs. It's extra base hits, hitting the ball in the gap, being somebody that can be an extra base hitting machine. And if that's what the Rockies are going to get from Holliday, that's a huge sign. On the flip side, though, what the main concerns and everything as we are approaching what could be some more changes within the organization, how much change is going to happen within the Rockies organization outside of the changes we've already seen after this season? What will the result of this historically bad season be in terms of the philosophies, the approaches, the development plans, XYZ? You have to develop this guy. You are in a position where, according to certain outlets, you got the best player in the draft. Now it's up to you. It's up to your organization to create the great ball player. It is on this organization to develop them. And we know that they say they're draft and develop, but we're still waiting on that. It's not going to do us any good if down the line here he's finally making his debut and he's striking out at a 30% rate like the first baseman for the Rockies is right now. Or he's batting sub 200 in the middle and the heart of the order when the Rockies are looking for big power and he continues to strike out on 3 pitches and gets blown away, or bats under 200 and the slugging numbers are down. This has to be another moment where the Rockies reflect and say, we cannot screw this up. You can't screw this up, because next year you have a pick that's going to be way further down in the draft. You don't get this level draft pick, a top 10 level draft pick next year. This draft pick, this name, this connection, this type of player, it is very, very important for this team to make sure that they are putting the resources, the coaches, the efforts into making sure that this guy is able to follow a path towards success. And it has to start trickling down into the other guys as well. Because my biggest concern when we're talking about a high-level offensive prospect, remember, he's only 18 years old. So it's not like he's going to be, knocking down the door here right away. Who knows what could happen, certainly with the Rockies or whatever, but a little bit longer of a development timetable here. Not a college guy that was 20, 21 years old playing 4 years of college ball in that type of situation. This has to be another. I don't know how many other starting points that you have to have, right? But this has to be a guy that you're putting your focus and your effort and your intention to, into creating this great ball player. Figuring out and making him be able to embody his father, making it so that he can be do the things that made his father successful in a Rockies uniform, and make sure that you're putting him in a position to be successful there as well. I love the pick. This was who I was hoping the Rockies were going to get. I think this is who the Rockies wanted to get. This is something that you can kind of sit there and build off of a little bit with the Rockies when you're talking about a good headline, some good news. MLB Network was even talking about that when they were doing the draft and going through and breaking down the pick, talking about how this is a good headline grabber for the Rockies as well. But it's not. It's one thing to just take the guy. It's now up to them and up to this organization to create the great ball player. And we have seen a lot of times the Rockies struggle in this area, and we're seeing the Rockies struggle in this area right now as well. We're seeing it with guys that we're hoping that, we're seeing some positive stuff, but again, my worries, my fears about the organization as a whole stick out in the back of my mind as well. Let's read a little bit more about Holliday, and of course, let's break down a frustrating series against the Cincinnati Reds, all coming up on today's episode of Locked on Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Gametime. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever to see concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see because, something crashed, whatever annoying process it is, the ticket buying process here, especially for concert tickets. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. That's how I got into the All-Star game a couple of years ago, and that's really, I use Gametime anytime I'm kind of on the fence or something like that, where I'm not 100% sure that I want to go, but I know I'm going to be able to not only get tickets, but tickets at a great deal with Gametime. And my favorite part, I'm going to get that panoramic seat view, so I'm going to know exactly where I'm sitting whenever I do use Gametime to get me covered for not only concerts, but theater, sports, you name it. The Gametime guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more in case your plans change. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Locked on Rockies here, back with you on segment number 2 of this draft reaction for end of the first half of the 2025 MLB season episode of Locked on Rockies here, reacting to Ethan Holliday. And of course, we're going to talk Rockies Reds here in just a moment. But I just want to read a little bit more here from ESPN and a little bit from Thomas Harding about Ethan Holliday, just to give you a little bit more insight into why the Rockies made this pick and who he is, of course, outside of just the last name, which, like I said, very exciting for us Rockies fans. Yes, he's Matt's son and brother of Orioles second baseman Jackson Holliday, the first pick in the 2022 draft. Like his brother, Ethan is a left-handed hitter, although he's much bigger, 6'4" compared to 6 foot, and built more like their dad. Thus, projects projects to have similar 30 homer power. He lacks the range to stay at shortstop, but should be an above-average defender at third base. There are some concerns about his performance last summer on the showcase circuit and weak competition this spring in high school, but scouts love the swing and power ceiling. There was plenty to talk about Holliday being a possibility for the number 1 pick, so the Rockies have to be happy about getting the player who might have the best chance of developing into a true major league star. His best case scenario is reaching the majors as a power-hitting, good fielding third baseman. You will take that all day, every day for the Rockies, who turns into the Rockies' first franchise player since they traded away a power-hitting, good fielding third baseman in Nolan Arenado. Now, if he plays defense like Nolan Arenado, then we're in for a whole new thing. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case there. I would love to see 30 home runs. 30 home run hitters are what the Rockies desperately need in this lineup. They need big power bats, and hopefully Holliday can turn into that. So that's what ESPN had to say. And here is a little bit more from from Thomas Harding here of MLB.com. While the Orioles' Jackson Holliday is playing second base and has the build for it at around 6 feet and well under 200 pounds, his physicality similarity to Matt is the curly hair, which Matt had when drafted at least. Ethan, who also has those boyish locks, and Matt are both listed at 6'4". Matt was selected as the third baseman, but the Rockies felt a burly frame that would reach 240 pounds was better suited for the outfield. Another possibility where Holliday could end up there, really following up in his footsteps there, his dad's footsteps. In his senior year at Stillwater, Ethan hit .617 with a 1.309 slugging percentage and 16 home runs in 32 games. While Ethan primarily played shortstop in high school, he played third base during the 2022 season when he shared the left side of the infield with Jackson. His size probably makes him a better candidate for the hot corner at the professional level. He has average speed and a solid throwing arm, making him a potentially above average defender at third. Ethan, by the way, is committed to Oklahoma State's baseball program, now coached by his uncle Josh Holliday, but at this draft position, he's almost certain to sign. Either way, he stays in the family. That's the other wrinkle there. You know, he could decide to stay with college, but you know that will be a pretty big draft position not to go ahead and sign. And if you the Holidays probably have a more interesting relationship with the Rockies than most, right? I mean, these kids grew up going to Coors Field. These kids grew up in the organization. Their father, who they've worked with throughout this entire time, has very strong ties to the Colorado Rockies organization. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up panning out for the club there. So again, I'm all for the pick. I'm excited for this pick. I think this is something that in a season of nothing but frustration and anger and disappointment, outside of a couple of small things, I say, like I said, we got Hunter Goodman, we got Jordan Beck performing pretty well. We've had some stories that kind of pop off, but not so much. This one here is one of those new, the good pieces here, the good pieces of news for the Rockies here. So this is also on the backdrop of the Rockies here, and I want to head to Denver sports here. They have a back-to-back couple of pieces here from Andrew Mason here, who's does the reporting over there on Denver sports. And I just want to read here from this is from after the results of Saturday's game. 3 of the Rockies' persistent maladies this season, poor defense, failures with runners in scoring position, and a leaky bullpen came together for loss 73, a 4-3 defeat to the Cincinnati Reds. Colorado came into Saturday leading Major League Baseball in errors, ranking 29th in batting average with runners in scoring position and sitting 26th in bullpen ERA. The 9th inning was a perfect storm for all 3 problems. Reliever Victor Vodnik failed to record an out as he went for his 3rd save of the season, asked to protect a 3-2 lead. He allowed a single to Spencer Steer and a triple to Will Benson on his first 2 pitches, quickly evaporating the lead. Benson's live drive careened off the wall back towards center field and past Brenton Doyle, who lost his balance and fell. Left fielder Jordan Beck ultimately retrieved the ball, and blah, 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 blah. Then the season-long defensive woes came into play as the game ended with an error. The Rockies' 80th of the season when Orlando Arcia bobbled Novelis Marte's slow grounder, an unfortunate end to a game that saw Colorado's infield execute 3 double plays. There was no guarantee that Arcia would have nailed Benson at the plate, but after that bobble, there was no chance sending the throng of 33,000 into the night. Those at bats dropped the Rockies 0 for 10 with runners in scoring position on Saturday. Colorado was 8 for 23 in its other at bats. So again, I wanted to bring this up because what sucked about this series so much, what's so frustrating, is this team can't stop committing errors. This team is not mentally tough. This team is not mentally locked in. And it shows you that it's young guys still learning the game, but it's just unacceptable for the way that it continues to be unacceptable for the way for these guys to handle some of these at-bats, handle some of these approaches, throw and kick the ball around, be unable to execute in the clutch situations. That's why they've lost so much and lost so many. The Rockies have played in a ton of close games, but they lose them because they are not mentally tough enough to be able to do the small things and execute when they need to execute. If the Rockies executed the way that they should be and should be capable of executing, they could have swept this series. Cincinnati didn't do anything outside of striking you out a ton that really put the pressure on. The Rockies pitching staff, for the most part, especially the starters, were able to keep games close, keep the Rockies into it. But when you're throwing around the ball, when you're constantly committing errors, when you're not clutch with runners in scoring position, going 0 for 10, when you're just that bad at the clutch moments and in the clutch situations, that's just the huge problem right there. It's one of many problems, but that's what this series should have been, one in which the Rockies actually could have been in a position where they had opportunities to be with comfortable leads, win games comfortably, but instead they lose in painful fashion. They let leads and they let themselves fall behind because of their inability to execute on the small things. These problems have mounted time and time again throughout the first half of this season. And unless this team actually starts really breaking down and really start able to make some progress on the development side, on the outside stuff, on the work side, you just have to sit there and just say that they continue to either be outmatched or outprepared. The other teams, they might not be doing a lot. Again, this Red series, you weren't blown out in any of these ball games. You had leads, you had opportunities. You didn't allow the Reds to score more than 4 runs in any of these ball games. German Marquez had a great start. It's up to the guys that the Rockies have continued to look at time and time again to come up big for them, and they fail time and time again. It's unacceptable again for veteran players to be as bad as they are in these big situations. It's unacceptable to look at the Rockies have 11 strikeouts and go 0 for 10 with runners in scoring position. That's a broken offense. That's a huge problem. And it hasn't been fixed. It hasn't been changed. You can keep throwing Orlando Arcia out there. I know we were hoping Estrada was going to be back. But for when you look at these guys and when you look at important members of this Rockies roster and their lack of production, it's flat out unacceptable. Michael Toglia continues to strike out time and time and time again. There needs to be some pressure on him. There needs to be some sort of a repercussion for him. There needs to be something where we're sitting here and saying, you need to figure something out. You need to either start hitting from one side and start focusing solely on that. You need to start developing a batter's eye. All of the Rockies do. It is maddening that teams can just come in and just dominate them on the strikeouts. Just throw stuff in the dirt. Look in the Sunday game. There was just so much stuff that started at the knees, broke, and the Rockies are chasing no matter what. It's swing, 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 swing. The only opportunity for the Rockies to in their brains, it has to be the main focus of we have to swing at every possible thing. And it just does not look like competitive real at bats from these guys. And that's what's just, it's the same stuff. How many times have we said the same old thing? But this series, a winnable series, a sweepable series, was lost because of the Rockies' inability to do the small things and play mentally tough baseball. And unless they make any adjustments and starts figuring out something there to start figuring out ways to stop striking out 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, however many times it is in a game, the Rockies will be at 100 losses before September. They're already well on that pace. They will not avoid the historically bad season. And it's just, that's what's, and I just don't have confidence in this team about helping these guys make adjustments and have them take more competitive at bats out there. I don't know if it's just a coaching and philosophy problem. I don't know if it's just a talent problem. It's really the mix of the both, but this series just kind of highlighted that this team continues to be behind the 8 ball when it comes to being competitive, even with closer losses, competitive losses. This series was frustrating because I can't just sit here and say competitive losses. I feel good about that. I feel good about close losses. No, they lost because they were not executing the fundamentals. They lost because they can't make adjustments on offense. They lost because they can't play fundamentally sound defense. Those are all massive, massive, massive problems for the Colorado Rockies. All right. Let's get ready for All-Star time and answer a question from the YouTube chat coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Back at it here on Locked On Rockies, segment number 3 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies, where you can find your team every day right here on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. And you can ask and fire off questions just like Juicy Booyah, who is a Mariners fan, says, Mariners fan here, curious what y'all think about a trade. We get Goodman, Bird, Vodnik. Y'all get a bunch of our top prospects plus Logan Evans. If the Rockies will probably be interested in moving Bird, I doubtful on Goodman, but if it's a bunch of top prospects and they're pitching prospects from a Mariners organization, then certainly. I mean, but here's the deal. Are the Mariners, who just played one of their best series of the season, is that the move that's going to put them over the edge? Are they willing to gamble on grabbing up Rockies players and moving on from some of their top level prospects? Because you mentioned there, you also mentioned Doyle, Tovar, Rymack, and Goodman all deserve so much better. I think it's more likely the Rockies are going to move on from Ryan McMahon, Herman Marquez, they're veterans, than a Goodman. I think when you're looking at Hunter Goodman, who statistically has had the best first half by a Rockies catcher ever, I don't know if the Rockies are going to move on from him considering his age and everything like that. Hunter Goodman can still factor into the couple years down the line type of team if he continues to develop at this rate. He'll be a very seasoned vet and could be a guy that's really found himself as a building block and foundational piece for the Rockies here. It is I think the other question too is how much are teams really interested in going after Rockies players this year? How much are they going to be interested in taking a flyer on these guys? Because I just feel like if you move on from Goodman, for example, and you don't move on from some of these other veteran guys, that doesn't kind of just follow the path that I'm hoping for. But the Rockies would certainly be looking for a haul, and that is a haul. And when you're talking about those pitchers, it'd be very interesting to see what happens when if Rockies pitching got into an organization like the Mariners, where they're so strong at their pitcher development, they're so good with creating and making sure that their pitchers are great, even with some of the struggles up and down stuff out of the bullpen that they've seen. So certainly, I think it's something that the Rockies would entertain if you're looking at that big of a package and you're able to get that big of a haul. My main and big concern is I just don't know what type of a haul any of these Rockies players are going to be able to get. Now, German Marquez, I think, has started raising some eyebrows there, especially with that last start before the All-Star game. I think with how the trade deadline is, probably has one, maybe two more starts before the trade deadline. Trade deadline's what, at the end of the month? So maybe a one or two more starts for German before he gets traded. And it all sucks talking about trading, guys like German, guys that are very popular amongst Rockies fans. But so to answer your question specifically here, I don't know if the Rockies are going to move on from Goodman, but if they're going to be able to get a big haul for something like that, you'd be intrigued about that, certainly. But I don't know, the trade, that's going to be fascinating. It's so hard to come up with an actual real, like, what does the trade deadline look like for the Rockies? Because they certainly have plenty of guys that they can move on from. They certainly should be selling as much as possible. But what is the market for these guys? That, I think, it continues to be my big question here for the Rockies and for the team going forward here as they approach the trade deadline. And you mentioned with some of those guys need to perform too. Ryan McMahon's season continues to be very, very frustrating. He has the big go-ahead blast. It helps out the Rockies in the dub. Certainly, he continues to flash and show that ability. I really do think it'll be looking at a position where Ryan McMahon could see a nice benefit from being in a different situation. I think Ryan McMahon, it really is starting to turn out to get yourself into a team that can help you see the game a little bit differently, help your approach get a little bit differently, help you see the ball a little bit differently, help you make an adjustment there. And to go back to like the Mariners are targeting a lot bigger bats, a lot more impactful bats. And maybe they'll go with I think people who go with the Rockies will probably looking more for bargain type of stuff, looking for their abilities to kind of, do some bargain bin stuff. But would the Rockies move a Brenton Doyle, for example? We remember talking to Rockies versus Connor there. Is Brenton Doyle going to be a factor in this rebuild when this team is back into a competing area in a competing season? Is Brenton Doyle still going to be a factor in that? Is he still going to be in his prime? Is he still going to be contributing in the way that he has, not so much this year, but has in the past? Certainly. I mean, it's lots of questions for the Rockies going into the trade deadline. So we'll see how it pans out. And to close on everything here on today's episode, Home Run Derby coming up. Nothing, not a lot of Rockies ties, but I love watching the Home Run Derby. I think it's always a fun way to kick off everything. I know it's not the actual kickoff, but I love watching the Home Run Derby just as a fun all-star game thing. I think that there's some interesting names in there. It'd be really interesting to see how they all pan out there, because we don't have the don't have Pete Alonso in there. You don't have some of the usual names, but there are certainly some really, really fun names here. James Wood is certainly going to be the one to watch there. Hits the heck out of the ball. And, of course, we were talking Mariners the whole time. Cal Raleigh. Jazz Chisholm is going to be kind of fun, too. I just feel like he'll be able to bring some always bring some fun there. And some guys, like the thing that's interesting about this home run derby is it's just loaded with guys that hit the hell out of the ball and hit the ball really, really hard. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. And, again, I think the home run derby, my star of the all-star break really is the home run derby. The game is great. The game is fun. Always a good time to see that as well. But I'm always tuned in and locked in for the home run derby. But folks, let me know what your reaction to the drafting of Holliday is. We'll continue to break down the first half of the Rockies and look ahead for the second half of the season here throughout the week, as well as the Rockies continue to play ball and hopefully try to avoid the dreaded historic loss season. Going to be tough to do so, but we'll be reacting to it all season long right here on Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming services. We are also available on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel where you can be part of the show. You can fire off your Rockies hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies. Until next time, I'm Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.